When the GOAT decides to hang him up, that is going to lead just about any show. So we are talking Canes, of course, for the next 60 minutes, but also Nick Saban announcing his retirement. That report confirmed today. Cam Underwood, State of the U, of course, in the chair right next to me, about 2,500 miles away. And we are talking Canes with all of you. We appreciate your comments and questions, your contributions as well here at the Voice of College Football. Cam, how you doing tonight?
Good, man. Good. Can't complain. So, woke up from a nap and saw that Nick Saban had retired. So, kind of crazy. But, and honestly, like, talking about that does spin into Miami's performance over the last bit and, recruiting and things like that. So, this is a year before I thought it was going to happen. I know I saw, like, Bomani Jones and Joel Anderson, they spoke about it, and Bomani was like, nah, he's going to retire this year. I saw Ross Dellenberger from Sports Illustrated, or Yahoo now, he predicted that Saban would retire this calendar year. And I was with him on that, but I was talking to a friend of mine, Fred, shout out to Fred Purdue, used to have a podcast with him, and he's just a sycophant for coaches. So I had to literally hang up on him when he goes on these diatribes about Saban. And, he's a fan of the team that Belichick coaches. And I literally had to outlaw it on our phone calls. I said, don't mention him. I'm going to hang up on you because I'm tired of it because it's crazy. But anyways, he was talking about, Saban's not leaving. And I told him last week, I said, well, first of all, I called my shot and said Michigan is going to beat them and win the national championship. So I'm counting. So a couple weeks ago, I was counting this season as a 2-loss season for Alabama before that second loss to Michigan. And I said, the next 2-loss season after this one, that's it. And Alabama people are crazy. And it's not just the fans on message boards or those who call into that, TV show with that bald dude who, whatever. But it's the money people as well. Like, they are crazy, bro. They have not won a championship in 3 years. And I know that there have been whispers about, does Saban have it? That, like, you had to have 4th and a mile and a half, and Auburn just doing the least possible and gifting Alabama that throw to win that game from a 2-loss regular season. Bro, like, that's what it took an all-time gaffe by your biggest rival not to have 2 losses in this regular season. Like, that's the margin and everything. And I know people talking about, if they would have lost that game to Auburn and not been in the playoff, you would already had calls for his job. You would have had people in the streets talking about it's time for him to go. So yeah, I said 2 weeks ago, it was actually 2 weeks, that the next 2-loss season would be the one that did him in. But instead he did it a year early, from what I thought, which is crazy. But, you're already seeing the fallout on the recruiting trail. Ryan Williams, who's a wide receiver 5-star, who was in a 25 class, reclassified up to 24, was committed to them. 37 minutes after the Saban news hits, he just decommitted. And he was already trending towards Auburn or elsewhere, right? But he was just like, you know what? Why fake the funk, right? And Bud Elliott actually asked this kid at the All-American game, said, so teams negative recruit against Saban, talking about, he's getting old and he's going to retire. And Ryan Williams at the All-American Bowl last week on video said, Saban told me, man, they going to have to, the only way I'm getting up off of this job is going into the grave. I'm going to be here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for the long haul. At 72 years old, right? I'm not going anywhere. Dead all, forget all that talk. A week later, he's retired. You know what I mean? So, Ryan Williams is already decommitted. And if we spin this to Miami, right, and like what that impact can be, I know, and I hate it. I didn't even watch the All-American Bowl because I couldn't watch Jeremiah Smith light everybody on fire. It hurts my spirit to see that kid not going to Miami. But he's the latest of a line of those guys who went to Alabama instead. Even guys who were borderline-ish, if you want to view it that way. Saban said, I see a star player there. I'm going to go get him. Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, Jerry Jeudy, right? The top guys. Even if you look back, Jordan Battle, whose father I worked with at Deerfield Beach for my first job back in 2004, who I used to remember going around and wanted to be a Hurricane from the time he was a toddler, right? Miami staff at the time said, we're not sure that he's physical enough. And Nick Saban said, hey, well, number 9 from St. Thomas, come on down, play safety, 3 years in the first-round draft pick. Dallas Turner, St. Thomas Aquinas. Well, we went after him pretty hard, but Saban said, come on down, 15. Just we're going to put 25 pounds of muscle on you. Come on, make some plays. Right. Bo Scarborough, running back, went there. 4-star, 5-star. Came on a late visit to Miami. Signed there. You got guys, what's the big offensive lineman? Evan Neal, right? Same thing. 5-star from Okeechobee. Had families, Miami fans and things like that. Okay, we think we can get this 6'9", 350-pound dude to come down and play offensive line. Took visits. I'm going to end up over there, coach. Remember the Paradise camps when those had more talent on Miami's campus than Nike's The Opening had for many years? All them dudes who were like, here, got the exposure. We wrote the articles. We saw them. Yo, who's number 457? All-American, 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 All-American. All on the intramural fields and Green Tree practice field at Miami for a camp. So you figure, look, you got them here. You can get them now, move the bar forward with their recruitment. Hey, we saw you evaluated. You came for this camp. Look, there's all these legends here. There's all this media here. There's all these fans here. Why don't you come back for an unofficial? Why don't you come back for an official? And build the recruiting through that. But even with all of that, a preponderance of those dudes went north, took a left, and ended up in Tuscaloosa. So, and look, I'm not saying every player that they signed, we would have signed. When I wrote the comparison article with Miami and Alabama recruiting years ago, it was fairly even on the players that we recruited against them. But there's a whole class of player that they recruit that wouldn't even return Miami's phone call. So I'm not saying that 100% of the guys that I've even mentioned or others would have come to Miami. However, the talent drain from South Florida specifically, from this area to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, has had a negative impact on Miami's success over the course of years. That's just real. And if you want to add other teams in there, O-State has got some guys, Clemson's got some guys, Georgia's got some guys, LSU's got some guys. There's other teams that have gotten guys and, seeded talent from South Florida. But the number one culprit for 20 fucking years was Nick Saban. So, I mean, look, one of the greatest, arguably, the most successful with championships, but arguably the greatest, college football coach of all time is Nick Saban. Him leaving is a major vacuum in the sport from a performance standpoint and also from a roster and a talent acquisition standpoint, because he's the guy that brought those guys there. If you remember Xavier Mincy, Daytona Beach mainland teammate of LJ McCray, who signed with Florida, Miami was recruiting him to the end. Didn't get him. And at his announcement at the All-American Bowl, again, last week, when asked, why Alabama? Like, I know that, these teams, Georgia, Miami, other teams were going down to the wire to recruit you. Why did you choose the Crimson Tide? Literally out of this kid's mouth. Playing for Coach Saban and Coach T-Rob, what can be better? But what did he lead with? Coach Saban, a defensive backs coach, defensive coordinator who worked his way up to head coach. He's seen the progression of these guys in the secondary. He's seen the development of these guys. So noting the head coach is like Travis Hunter noting Deion Sanders. Look, because I'm not playing for the defensive coordinator. I'm playing for Deion because I'm different, like Deion was different. And so Xavier Mincy, seeing the progression of Saban's career, even at the head coaching level now of a team success, knows this guy knows what he's talking about with defensive backs. So I'm going to list him first for reasons why I went there. He is not there anymore. And that is a major, major thing. Now, if you spin this back, can this be successful or help Miami maybe to get some of the talent that was going towards Tuscaloosa to instead go to Coral Gables? It could be possible. Mario Cristobal is a great recruiter. We know that much, even if we have questions about his game day performance. But yeah, I know that it is Alabama-centric because he's was the Alabama head coach. And I know that they're going to feel the most of it and all those kind of things. But, I would be remiss, especially on a Miami show, as a Miami alum, and Miami, blogger and everything, not to point out that, hey, this can have ripple effects that have a positive effect for Miami down the line if we take advantage of the opportunity in front of us. But that remains to be seen. But, hey, congratulations to Coach Saban on a long and successful, arguably the most successful and, best career as a college coach ever. But yeah, this is seismic news in the world of college football.
It absolutely is. And there's been speculation about this happening each and every year as his age ticks up 1 year at a time, just like the rest of us, that it could happen at any moment. I got to think that he's also a bit disgruntled and a bit worn out, not physically, mentally, emotionally, like can't take it or doesn't want to step up to the challenge, but just where college football has gone with the transfer portal, with NIL and all of that, he's grown a bit tired of. I think that's pretty obvious in what he has stated.
Yeah, but I mean, on the other hand, like they were the best bagmen going back before NIL. Like, it's, when you look at Stephen Godfrey's Meet the Bagman, he was embedded with SEC people. Like, I've spoken to people, I've told the story, on here before through, that I heard third hand, but, guys go out in the middle of nowhere, Alabama, two dudes in suits with a briefcase, order a cup of coffee, leave the briefcase, and there's $50,000 in there. And they know that the waitress is the cousin, sister's, girlfriend's friend of this recruit that they are trying to get to go to Alabama. All the Chargers and Challengers, which, have stopped production. Dodge is no longer making those cars, but all of a sudden everybody has one of those at Alabama and everything. Like, I know that he wanted to play holier than thou, but like when his cadre of people, when his shadow network was the most effective in the sport, it wasn't a problem. You know what I mean? So I hear you on that, but also take that with a grain of salt. But yeah.
No, I wasn't making that statement from the standpoint of defending his character in any way or integrity, but from the standpoint of what you just said, in that the effectiveness of it may be waning because of everybody else being able to do it above board. And it,
I mean, maybe in terms of one or two players a year, but then again, at the height that he was sustaining, one or two players a year. Well, I mean, look at Jeremiah Smith. If that's the one player that freaking matters, you know what I mean? I could see some of that, but yeah, I mean, I guess, but hey, yeah. See, whatever we're speculating, he's made the concrete decision. So yeah.
Yes, he has. And Alabama has a huge decision that they have not had to make for 16 years in front of them. Falconer TRX, appreciate you being here as always. Super sticker to get us started. And we also have Falconer coming back with this one as Nick Saban entered the transfer portal.
I think that no, he has decided that he's just not going to play anymore. He's taking his ball. He's going home. There was that quarterback who was at Florida? I saw or something, who was like the third string, and he was just like, I saw it like last week. It was respectfully, not a name that you would know. He's not somebody who's played, but he was just like, you know what? I'm good. Like, I'll be here. I'll finish my degree. I'm going to go pro in something other than sports. Like, that's it. And yeah, I think that that's where Nick Saban is taking his talents to, the TV world, where he will be able to make a whole bunch of money and everything. I know that ESPN continues to say that Lee Corso can stick around as long as he wants to, but golly, man, like, they need to look. Lee Corso, look, congratulations. Like, you've done this forever. I'm not trying to take anything away. It is tough to watch. Just bring the man in for the headgear segment, but like, it's really challenging to watch him decline to this level and rate and longevity, because it's been so long. You know what I mean? But like, bring him in for the headgear, and then like have Nick Saban be, the coach on the set for half the show. You won't even need Saban there the whole entire time. Let them have their shenanigans. Let them do their cutaways to whatever. And then when you get to the analysis part from 10:45 to 12 on Saturday morning. You know, like that last 75 minutes. Bring in Saban. He's there. Bring in Corso at the end. But like, I'm giving away free money to ESPN. Not like they need it because they cut their overhead and, you know, increase their profits at the same time. So like they're swimming in money. But like, yeah. But anyways, whatever.
I have wholeheartedly agreed with that perspective for a long time. And for those few people that say, well, you're heartless or no, everyone needs to perform in their role.
Right.
You know, this is a business. This is an entertainment business. And you need to be able to perform. And it's been long, long ago that he was not able to perform in that role. And they were propping him up, doing a number of things to prop him up. And it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. But yeah, bring him on. Let him do the headgear. And they can continue that tradition. Falconer X with his own tradition here at the Voice of College Football Miami. Mario should offer Nick an assistant position just for clicks and trolling.
Not even an assistant, an analyst position, because that's where the Nick Saban School for Wayward Coaches, which is now closed, that's where they would start, right? So you get fired somewhere else. In most instances, the staff was full. So then you bring in a Mike Loxley. He gets fired in New Mexico. You bring him in as an offensive analyst, doing the, $40,000 a year job that, a grad assistant would graduate to once they're finally a full-time coach or something like that. Yeah, bring him in for that. Like, why not? I mean, we got Ed Orgeron around, right? Look, he likes to golf. We know that he wants to be in, warm weather and everything. Look, you already probably still have a home here for when you worked at the Dolphins and then left in the middle of the night. Come on down. We got good golf. We got great weather. You can be around. Look, even if you want to be like Ed Reed, where, when he was chief of staff or whatever, fly in for a couple of days a week, come over to campus 2 or 3 times a week. Look, why don't you play the Biltmore course at the world famous Biltmore Hotel in Coral Gables? If you wanted to play other courses, there's other courses owned by other people whose names I will not say in the near Miami area, but there's plenty of stuff for you to do. Nick, come on down. It'll only be a couple hours a day. Let's get it.
We've got Falconer TRX with, why does that bald dude have a job?
Respectfully, I work really hard. Oh, you're not talking about me. You're talking. Yeah, look, I don't like him, but I mean, his takes are provocative. He's been doing it for a long time, and people watch and listen. Like, I mean, whether I like, and I don't consume his content at all. I don't even say Buddy's name. You know what I'm talking about on the SEC Network. He has the Drive Time radio show.
You're that adamant about.
Yeah, no, I don't. I like
him.
Yeah, those people who I don't do, whose content I don't subscribe to or things like that. I don't say their names because I'm not going to signal boost their thing. And like, it took me a while because when I was running the state, well, I still am running the State of the U Twitter, but like, sometimes I get hyped up and I will like quote tweet and I'll dunk on people, but I'm using my platform to like propagate their platform. I'm not going to do that. And he has enough listeners and viewers and everything. And also he talked greasy to me one time and called me a fucking moron. And I'm just not going to stand for that. So, I took that personally. And yeah, so, but again, whether I like it or don't, the numbers of viewership of the show that is simulcast on television, the viewership and, the engagement that he gets is at the top of the list. And while I do not like him, I will respect the work.
Did he do that because, wait a minute, did he do that in person or on social media?
No, I've never met that person in person. I would have put hands on him if he would have said that to my face. But yeah, no, it was a thing, and it was a above board back and forth. But then he was just like, you're stupid and don't know anything about sports, so why would I talk to you? And I just said, you know what, I'm not going there.
That's certainly not true.
So yeah,
I have thought that about him at times because if you watch his show, which I haven't seen in a couple of years, but I at times have thought, okay, I need to follow these people, listen to these people, see what's going on, just to take in the news cycle.
Right.
And so much of what we do now, unfortunately, I don't like this trend, but is a reaction to other people's reaction, which I try to stay away from and do for the most part. But again, I've got to weigh the business versus my own interests and preferences. And I just found it to be, number one, a little boring, and he's provocative on occasion, and those are the things that drive the needle and get him on Sports Center, where he says some outlandish things. But from caller to caller to caller to caller, in terms of what he consistently does, I find it very bland, and he doesn't really offer much. He allows the callers to kind of drive the show, and he just kind of sits there and lets them go off, and he's just kind of a conduit, is what I have found. And if he's asked any football questions, he rarely has, I mean, never that I've ever seen has any substance. You know, he's supposed to be Mr. SEC, and he gets asked about, well, Texas A&M's playing Alabama this week. I think A&M's got, the front seven, and he'll just be like, yeah, Jimbo's really recruited well. And boom, he's off to the next call, because he really has nothing.
Yep.
There. Michael Davis, we appreciate you stopping by, sir. This is for the Broke Miami program, Unconquered.
Cool.
Falconer. Howard said, quote, build a fence around South Florida.
We're trying. But yeah, I was going back and forth with some people, and even people, that I know and respect and know things about recruiting. And they're like, well, yeah, but so basically talking about, well, why were people talking about South Florida Express having players go elsewhere? I'm like, but it's become a national group, and they have players from around the country. And it's like, yeah, but everybody can't go to Miami, was the response. I said, well, no, it's about the ones that are not going to Miami. Jeremiah Smith, prime example. And they're like, and then that person responded, was like, yeah, well, you can't get everybody. And then another friend of mine popped in and was like, yeah, but if you can't get everybody, then let's get all the best dudes and let the ones that get away be the other ones. Let it not be where we're aspirationally looking up and the top guys get away. And that's the issue. So we are trying to build that fence around South Florida and just, those guys that we want. But it takes time, and, we're working on it, but that is part of the process.
I did not read this article, but apparently 247 Sports posted an exclusive interview with Jeremiah Smith just a day or two following his announcement in National Signing Day, and he was pretty upfront about Miami making a mad rush.
Yeah. And he said, he went to 2 minutes before the ceremony and everything, and then just, really thought about, the history of success that Heartline has had in developing players. But again, and I know that it's going to take a special person to you have to, at a measure, you have to walk by faith and not by sight. I know that it is again, if you're looking at work product, Miami versus, Alabama, Ohio State in terms of wide receiver development and everything, Miami's at a deficit. Right. But you have to recruit right against that. And you have to get the kids to sign it and be, okay, I'm going to start this new legacy. I'm going to be that dude. That's what it has to be. But yeah, he was very upfront about it and everything. Still doesn't make me feel good about it. Like I said, I couldn't even watch the All-American Bowl. I just, and Marquise Lightfoot, 4-star, looked like a 5-star defensive end. He was a monster. He was going up the field against left tackle. He speed rushed around the outside. Okay, then the tackle's like, cool, I'm going to take an extra deep drop, and I'm going to cut off that speed rush. Swoop, spin move back inside. He was a monster in that game. You had all kinds of guys that were making plays and doing things, but I am still scorned. That's like watching your significant other getting married to somebody else. I couldn't watch it. I couldn't do it. I feel some kind of way, and I'm going to be very upfront and honest about my emotion in that. Hey, whatever happens with his career, great. But I am myself personally, the person, Cam Underwood. It still bothers and upsets me.
It's one of the things I love about you, Cam. The mix of just sheer articulate analysis from the brain, the cerebral portion of you and then the emotions.
Yeah, well, hey, I am an emotional person. What can I say?
Michael Davis, Howard said, "Oh no, FSU is coming 4th and 14."
Cool, thanks.
I just read them, and as
No, I
long
get
as
it.
they,
No, that's perfectly fine. I
I
mean,
think
hey,
there's been 2 in the history of all my channels that I
Ye-
didn't read because they were just
right.
insulting to people. All
No, I
right,
did the
light
same
skin
thing.
cage. Here we go. I think, let me get the name correct. Reese Poffenbarger is a solid depth add with potential, mobile gunslinger, decisive, and good short interim touch. In my opinion, lacks size, upper end arm strength to consistently hit the shots that could cap his Power 5 career. A veteran Power 5 quarterback is my first choice.
Yeah. So moving on to this question, Light Skin Cage, appreciate it. So Reese Poffenbarger transferred from FCS University of Albany, where he was the FCS's leading passer with over 3,600 yards, had also 36 touchdowns, and led the team to the quarter or semifinals of the FCS playoffs. I forget which one, but a deep run into the playoffs. He is 6'1.5" tall, about 210, 215 pounds. So he is not the largest guy. So he does not fit necessarily the physical profile that Shannon Dawson has been recruiting. Neither does Luke Nickel, the 2025 commit, who's only 6'2", as opposed to other dudes in the room who are 6'5", 6'5", and 6'6", or 6'7", depending on what you have on Judd Anderson. But yeah, this is a guy who has dual threat ability. He is mobile in the pocket. He will also pull it and run. You see that on his highlights. He is a gunslinger, definitely. I will have that from seeing his film and everything. Seems pretty decisive, will read the field, or at least half of it, but has a good idea of the offense and what they're trying to do and where they're trying to get the ball. Has good touch in the short and intermediate ranges, like Light Skin Cage says. His arm is average. It's not really super strong. So the deep shots are not going to be, okay, I'm sitting here and I'm reading the crosser, the check down, the out, oh, hey, there's a guy 60 yards down the field. Late, let me throw that. Like, it's not like we're getting Matt Stafford, kind of arm where, I watched his whole entire career for the Detroit Lions, right? So he could look around and be like, oh, there's a guy over in Ypsilanti somewhere. Let me sling the ball and it'll get there on time. That's not going to be the thing with Reese Poffenbarger. So we can scheme shots up. They schemed plenty of deep shots up at Albany. They need to get the ball has to come out on time. He can push the ball, 50-ish yards down the field. I mean, depending. So those are like between 35 and 50-yard throws, depending on what your diagonal is. Like from the far hash over, he had a nice throw that was about 56 yards, and I actually did the math on the hypotenuse of that right triangle, seeing how far down the field and how wide it was for that throw. But yeah, I mean, good enough arm strength, right? And again, good performance, took a team deep into the FCS playoffs. I think at this point, we definitely as the roster is currently constructed. So that being Reese Poffenbarger, Judd Anderson, Emory Williams coming off of an arm injury, of obviously non-throwing arm, but still, and Jakari Brown. With those four right now, roll the ball out there, best man wins. And I think that we should always take that view. But like when you have a Tyler Van Dyke coming back heading into this season, it wasn't a quarterback competition. It was Tyler Van Dyke's team. And like when you have a star player like that, it should be. Now, he did not live up to the potential of performance, but that methodology fit. In this one, it's open. I think it should be. Now, a veteran quarterback being Light Skin Cage's choice and mine also, if Tua's little brother, Taulia Tagovailoa, gets a miracle extra year, sign me up. Let's go. Bring him down. He can stay at his brother's house, drive down to campus. I don't care. But I think that he fits and is a clear upgrade for 1 year of over what we have seen. And then just let him fight it out. And even if you bring him in, then say, look, we're going 5 wide on the quarterback room. I don't know how you're going to get enough reps. You better make a friend with a wide receiver and a tight end or a couple of them so you can run, player-led workouts and get the extra reps and everything. But I think if you bring in a Taulia, he goes to the top of the list, and you really want him to win that job if you bring him in, because you're probably going to have to pay significant NIL money to get him here. But I would be much more comfortable with that. From a scholarship standpoint, I would feel better with 4 quarterbacks instead of 5, especially with one as a mercenary for 1 year, because you still can only have 85 scholarships, right? You can bring in players from like unlimited players from whatever source up to your 85 cap. And like, we're kind of getting close to it. So I would prefer that we ran with 4, but from a talent standpoint, I would feel better about the 24 season if we brought in Taulia or someone of that ilk that's out there to raise the talent ceiling for this position. But bringing in Poffenbarger, the last thing I'll say is I think that he raises the floor for this ceiling. I don't think that it would fall out to be, 5-7, 4-8, 3-9 with him on the roster. I think I think he raises the floor to like a 6-6, which isn't the greatest. It's not Nick Saban championship. It's not Bobby Bowden 17, 22 years in a row, top 3 finishes. I know it's not that, but raising the floor to being bowl eligible minimum is still a step in the positive direction, and hopefully we build on top of that.
I've seen a lot of Taulia Tagovailoa. I like what I see. I've always liked him. I just think he can sling it. Now, that might be just a little bit more fan in me than, I've got to sign him to play for my team, because he puts the ball in harm's way a little bit too often, because he does trust his arm. But, man, if you can rein that in just a little bit, go watch him play Michigan last year. Man, he put on a clinic, but he also threw 2 picks that weren't the best. And he also scrambled to his left. Now, this is also the Michigan pass rush being devastating in a way that we saw Monday night. He had a scoop and score against him because they just blindsided him, chased him down, and stripped the ball out of his hands. And there you go. But he had that team within a touchdown of the eventual national champions. So
even to get there, he had to play, in 7th gear, throttle on, like skirting the edge of a sharp knife, and everything. And if you look around, you think, okay, well, you have comparable or better skill position talent all around. You have a better offensive line in Miami than you do at Maryland currently, and things like that. Like, maybe there are other things on this roster that can help rein in the fact that he had to play like his hair was on fire. It's almost like they're not the same player at all. The going to the professional level will not be the same. So I say all that up front. But after he finally got into the starting lineup, people talk to Patrick Mahomes about his time at Texas Tech. Like, bro, you threw all these interceptions. He's like, I knew that I was the guy and there weren't guys like that with me. So I had to increase my risk profile to have a chance. Right? I had to do some things and I have this legendary arm, so I had to trust it a little bit, maybe more than I would want to, but like, I had to push the envelope to be competitive. And I think that Taulia, again, being a lower talented guy than Patrick Mahomes, I'm not making that comparison on everything, but I'm saying play style wise, maybe he had to be a little bit more aggressive to try to get everything out of what was there to maximize the potential, as opposed to, if I play a little bit more conservative, then we really don't have a chance. And so the variance of, they blew some teams out because, look, we're going balls to the wall. We're doing everything. We're taking deep shots. I'm throwing it, like, I'm putting balls in harm's way, but like my wide receiver, the 5-star Jarrett kid, boom, he jumps over somebody, he goes and scores. We do this and we do that, but playing on the edge of danger, right, also can be the thing that is high risk, high reward, and we get rewarded for that kind of a thing. And if he doesn't, and if he has more talent around him, maybe he can scale back that level of performance where he's skirting the edges a little bit of the margins of performance, as it were, so that he can rein it back in and be a little bit more successful. And I would hope that is the case if my prior analogy is accurate or near enough. But again, I'm not saying that he is like the other player I mentioned. I'm just talking about increasing risk profiles and things like that during on-field performance.
Brett Favre was challenged about a 6-interception game in a playoff against the St. Louis Rams, who this was in their heyday, greatest show on turf, and they got killed. They lost, 48-24 or something. And after 3 interceptions, he said, we're not competing in that game if I shut it down and just say, well, we're going to lose by 2 touchdowns because I'm going to protect the ball. I had to go for it.
And that's the thing that I've talked about before, like even with games, like Miami and Florida State going into that game this year. Do you play to win or do you play not to be blown out? And that's exactly what he's like. Look, so I had to sling it up there because I'm playing to win. And if you miss those shots, like if you take home run swings, maybe you hit it 575 feet, right? But also if you take those big ass swings, you're going to walk back to the dugout having struck out a lot. You know what I mean? Like that's the risk reward, that you have to weigh.
Light Skin Cage coming back. Also, sorry, Mark. Congrats, Cam, with the Wolverines W.
Thank you. Yeah, my Wolverines gear is in my next room because I was wearing it all weekend and everything. But yeah, man, I felt good. It took me back to my youth. Like I was in high school the last time that the Wolverines were, champions of the world. So, it felt good. I called it for the playoff ahead of time and said, yeah, like this is what it's going to be. And, there were so many shows and like previews that I read and watched and listened to and everything. And everybody said, look, they might not be able to sack Michael Penix because like he is a magician in the pocket, but they need to hit him. And in the semifinal, Synergy Stats had Texas with 0 quarterback hits, that being hits as or directly after the quarterback throws the ball. That's a quarterback hit. They said that happened 0 times against Texas. And then they said, look, if Michigan is to win, that number has to be an integer higher than 0. Like you cannot just have 0. And like, I mean, they haven't come out and said it, but I think that he cracked his ribs in that fourth quarter. Like Michigan, like they beat him up and it had him shook. He missed that touchdown to Romo Dunze. Shout out to a guy who 4 years ago I said Miami should have been recruiting from Bishop Gorman because he went out there. Eventually, well, we did recruit him, but he wasn't at the top of the board. Goes up there. It took him a while, but he has a great career. He's going to be first round draft pick, but that's a name that we know here from Las Vegas Bishop Gorman High School, right? Because he was a little bit after Brevin Jordan, but had him as best wide receiver in the country, wide open and missed him. And like when I saw that, I was like, oh, like that's, and like it was I had to have been torturous for Dan Lanning to be the halftime analyst for that because I know he's sitting there like, God damn it, like we played them twice and he ain't never missed none of those against us, but he missed that in the championship game, and Michigan eventually was able to do things, and I actually got my buddy in trouble. I was up at his condo, his townhouse and everything, and was making a little bit too much noise for his elderly neighbor after one of the touchdowns and everything. So, yeah, but in the end, it was a good experience, man. My uncle went to the University of Michigan, so he was texting me back and forth. Had a couple other friends who went there from high school and everything. So it was good to see. And I've always said, I haven't said it recently, but I root for 3 teams every week. Number 1 is the University of Miami, my alma mater, orange and blue. Like ever since I enrolled the day after my 19th birthday, this has been my number 1. Like, boom, I'm here. Like I blog about it. Like then I go to the games. Like you all know that. Number 1 is Miami. Number 2 is Michigan, the team of my youth. And number 3 is whoever's playing Ohio State because I hate them. It could even be Florida. I'm picking Florida over Ohio State. Like those are the 3 teams that I root for every single week, honestly and truly. Like again, this is me being honest. So when my number 2 team, the team of my youth, I played basketball tournaments at Chrysler Arena in the parking lot area, which is right next to University of Michigan Stadium. I've been over to Ann Arbor Pioneer for performances, which is diagonally across the intersection of State and Maine, I think it is, there and everything. It was really cool, man. So I felt great about that. So I appreciate it.
Well, I take some solace in that if you don't matter, then nobody hates you.
Facts. Absolutely. So I'm with it, but yeah, it was a good. I enjoyed the game, but I appreciate Light Skin Cage.
Yeah, it was a heck of a performance, no question. J Mays 2388, thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate even for those that you got nothing in particular to say, but just basically saying thanks for the content. Thanks for the discussion. Thank you for that, J Mays 2388. Falconer TRX, Reese Puff, bigger than Ken Dorsey and adds depth.
I mean, he's more muscular than Ken Dorsey, but remember Ken Dorsey is 6'5", and adds depth, yes. And like I said, raises the floor. Do you have another super chat or?
We don't.
Cool. I just wanted to bring up then really quickly that draft eligible juniors can be invited and can accept invitations to the Senior Bowl. They made that change a couple years ago. And the latest two, or among the latest group that have accepted those bids, University of Miami safeties Cameron Kinchens and James Williams. So they will be playing in the Senior Bowl, which is, again, a super showcase for NFL, like talent. Excuse me. You've had plenty of stories of guys being drafted by the teams whose coaching staffs work the game. Everybody in the NFL, like every, front office has multiple people there throughout the week, seeing all the workouts, seeing the game, seeing the practices, which are even more illuminating than the game can be. So, congratulations to Cam and to James. They are joining Javion Cohen, I know, is going out there. I think Matt Lee is going also. I should have looked up for that one. Leonard Taylor might also be a guy who can be on that list as well. But I did see in the latest round, they had like 5 underclassmen safeties who just accepted bids to the Senior Bowl. So, I mean, there'll be plenty of competition, but, that's where those guys want to be, because they're obviously leaving to go to the NFL. So you cannot shy away from competition. Not that they did anyways in their careers. But yeah, congratulations to them. Looking forward to that week coming up in Mobile, Alabama, for them and all of the guys playing in the Senior Bowl, and see, how they show for themselves, and, going towards draft season, what their grades and everything are going to be. I'm going to be very interested. I mean, look, I want to see how Cam Kinchens stacks up athletically against the other guys, because he is not a super duper incredible athlete, but I want to see, like how he stacks up, and maybe maybe he shows more athleticism than we've even seen. Because again, I know all football players are great athletes, but I mean, I'm talking like the Keon Colemans of the world, who in slides and, skinny jeans is doing 360 windmill dunks at Mike Norvell's house on his recruiting visit. You know what I mean? Like, he's a different kind of athlete. Cam Kinchens is a great football player and everything, but he's not a different athlete like that. Like, how Devin Hester was in fast forward against even fast players. That's what I mean. So I want to see if he can be, league average plus in terms of his athleticism. And also interested to see, what do they do with James Williams, and where do they play him? Do they actually leave him at safety? Does he get time or at both safety and outside backer? I'm really interested to see that, because that will be illuminating to see, what the NFL thinks of his skill set and frame, because he's a giant dude at 6'5", 230 pounds, but we'll see.
Our buddy Chi-Town Kane is talking about the wide receiver commit to Alabama, Jamie Ffrench, now looking at Miami real hard.
It's French with 2 F's, by the way. So yeah. FFRENCH. That's like a Creole Gullah kind of name. We had a kid with that name at Miramar one time, and the mom came to sign him out. I was covering on the front desk welcome center for somebody who stepped to the bathroom when I was in a meeting. And I was looking up on the system, and I was like, I know how to spell French. She's like, I was like, I don't see French. And she's screaming and everything. And I was like, all right, can you spell the name for me? She goes, FF. And I'm like, sis, you see. Everybody would say it that way. But anyways, sorry, I digress. Anyways, kid is a high 4-star, borderline 5-star talent. He's from Jacksonville Mandarin High School. If that name sounds familiar, he was teammates with Derek Plaz on that team, that Mandarin Mustangs team that made it to the state championship game and ended up losing to Aquinas. No, they didn't play Aquinas. They lost to whoever was a step down from Aquinas in the next classification down. Fui. I cannot remember. Anyways, but yeah, that was his teammate. So Derek Plaz, who was a late addition to the All-American Bowl, formerly the U.S. Army All-American game. Late addition after his All-State season this year was Derek Plaz. Shows up, looks the part, and is built like a tackle, 6'5", 325 pounds with, 34.5-inch, 35-inch arms. Steps right in, dominates one-on-ones, goes and starts at left guard on the East team and plays the majority of the game and just excelled, right? So if you're looking at, well, Derek Plaz is like a 3-star. What did I just tell you about where he went and how he performed, guys? Trust the evaluations, because this is another guy who I think is better than his evaluation said. Remember a couple weeks ago, I was like, I think there's a couple 3-stars who are probably better than that. Derek Plaz leads that list. And not only that, he's the most vocal kid on social media in this recruiting class, trying to get other guys here. And now he's already posted a picture standing next to his good friend and high school teammate, Jamie Ffrench, with the eyeball emoji, just like Chi-Town Kane said. And he's like, hey, like, bro, we already did this. We already took the team to the chip. Didn't win it because, okay, that happens. But like, yo, why don't you slide? Mustang's colors are orange and green. So you got enough gear. All we got to do is change out the logo from the Mustang to the U, and we're good. So yeah, that's a guy that we're going to look at. And as Mark said in the intro, this is a kid who's currently committed to Alabama because he committed during his junior season. Again, this is where the trickle down can happen. Can is possible to. I'm not saying it will, but this is where you could see a path forward and saying, hey, Miami has already been there recruiting, right, for a couple of years to get Derek Plaz. It's a known name. We're a name brand program, right? Hey, you had a friend here, and then going from there. So yeah, I would hope that he looks at Miami. I want to make moves with this kid because I think that he can definitely play. And so, yeah, we should be leveraging Derek Plaz and anybody who's associated with Jacksonville Mandarin that, is within the NCAA rules to try to get Jamie Ffrench down, for another camp visit and everything. Hey, man, what would be really great for you, Jamie, is understanding the nightlife around Coral Gables in South Miami. So why don't you come on down to campus, right, during your spring break, hang out with your buddy Derek, see what shakes, and go from there. I would even be willing to have that be some of the stuff to get him to leverage in recruiting. But yeah, we should be going after him anyways. But the news of Nick Saban leaving and also having one of his teammates, down on this roster starting on Friday, I believe, is move in for the early enrollees. Yeah, let's see what happens.
Falconer. Sucks when guys go NFL. Also, love when guys go NFL.
Yeah, you really love it when they hit and they play well. Like a Gregory Rousseau, like a Jalen Phillips. I know that he tore his Achilles this year, but like both of those dudes, they left after 3. Russo actually left after 2 because he didn't play the COVID season. You know what I mean? Well, which really means he only played 1 year actually here. But you know what I mean? Because he redshirted, he played as a redshirt freshman, had all those records, sat out the COVID year, boom. But they go to the league, they play really well. I know it's an older name because he was only a couple years behind me at the U, but Calais Campbell still making plays. You know who started for the San Francisco 49ers? John Feliciano on the offensive line. So I say that to say Al Golden's teams had talent on them. He refused to change the defense and everything. But again, John Feliciano and Danny Isadora, those 2 guys in that class, 3 stars from Davie Western and Weston Cypress Bay, respectively, said, look, those are going to be 3-year project guys. They're not going to find a meaningful snap in Miami until their redshirt sophomore years, right? But through that development, I think Isadora was on a practice team, if not a roster. And like I said, John Feliciano started the other week for the number 1 seed in the NFC playoffs. Hello. And now I know it took an injury for him to get in there, but he was still playing rotational snaps. But when you get these guys and they go into the league and they do well, now hopefully you can say, hey, you, insert recruit here, can come here and be the next one. Like, who's still just doing his thing, making plays, helping that team to almost make the playoffs? KJ Osborne with the Vikings in my division, because we've won the division 2 years in a row. We didn't win it last year because we stumbled against other non-NFC North teams, but we went 5-1 against the teams in the division. That's winning the division. We went 4-2 against the division this year. I mean, against division competition. It was the other teams that they put us against that like beat our brains in, right? But you're talking 9-3 against the division the last 2 years. Sorry, Lions talk. I digress. But when we played the Vikings in the game where we won the division or cemented the first division win in 30 years, Fred, who's friend, because like he likes to just be on. He likes to play the version of an op all the time. He's texting me talking about, hey, you want to talk about that KJ Osborne touchdown, which I saw that put the Vikings ahead, and my Detroit Lions had to come from behind to win that game and thus the division. But that's a guy who went to Miami. I know he didn't go to Miami for all 5 years, but that's a guy who came to Miami and then went to the league and is doing numbers. So there are guys around. Yeah, it does hurt the current roster to lose guys to the league, but that has to be part and parcel of the process. We're going to develop you. We're going to get you to the next level. We're going to recruit your replacement, and then we're just going to have that cycle go over and over and over. That's why when people were asking me last week, hey, Cam, what positions are we going to focus on the recruiting front this year? I said offensive line, and I know people said, look, we just brought in another 4 offensive linemen this year. We had the number 1 offensive line class last year. What are you talking about? Those guys are going to be third-year players by the time the 25 recruits hit campus. You want to backfill with elite dudes to look for, is Francis Mauigoa going to come back for his 4th year? Hopefully not. Hopefully he's going to be Penei Sewell and leave and be a top 5 draft pick after 3. You know what I mean? So if that's going to happen, and also that's going to be the end of Markel Bell's eligibility, because he's coming from JUCO, the 6'9", 360-pound tackle that we brought in this year. So you really got to look at that, because not only are the guys that you recruited in 23 going to be 3 years on and either looking to the NFL to transfer somewhere else to play or otherwise, then you have a guy who's mid-cycle of eligibility like a Markel Bell added on top of that. You got to always be circling back, always be recruiting. So you have to build that in, and it has to be the mentality. We're going to bring in elite guys. We're going to recruit over you. Hopefully we're going to get you to the league, and then that's going to open up a job so the guys go where they're able to play and not have to transfer, because Jesus, what team is it? I forget. There's a team that has 2 starting tackles. It's a college football team. And their other dude had to leave because the dudes in front of him are not draft eligible. So he had to transfer somewhere else to be able to go to play. I wish I remembered this kid's name. They were talking about it on the Cover 3 podcast the other day. God darn it. But it's a school, and like their 2 tackles are good, and they're probably going to be NFL players, but they're not currently. So the other NFL type body, instead of like kicking inside where they have talent at guard and center, it's like, I'm going to transfer somewhere else and go play a, coveted tackle position there. You want to have those good problems. And, we'll see. Hopefully we're able to get there.
KJ Osborne has gotten himself off to a nice little NFL career here with 50, 60, and 48 catches.
And he played, I think he's the punt returner or part-time punt return on that. I think he also might play on one of the coverage units. So being flexible and versatile, so you want to see those guys do well. And the guy, I didn't even mention Tyreek Stevenson. I know he was at the end of his eligibility, but that guy's been making play after play after play after play. David Njoku, that's a household name, one of the best tight ends in the league. You know what I mean? So hopefully we're seeing the beginning of a new wave of names that we'll know going into the league. And then we can have down the line some linemen, or even this year with Cohen and Lee, and get some linemen in there. Because, if you're really good, linemen can have longevity on their teams of, 8, 10, 12, 15 years. And it's like, oh, yeah, he did go to Miami. Oh. And that's how Miami gets mentioned on all these broadcasts. And then it circles back. So even if you're watching on a Sunday, here, the U. Oh, yeah, really? Oh, okay, cool. Da-da-da. And it can be passive recruiting. So, it is like, would next year's team be better if all the guys who have chosen to go to the NFL came back to school? Absolutely. But you want them to go and be successful, and hopefully you're building a roster that are building a program that can sustain these losses, as opposed to being like Deion Sanders and building a mercenary squad that is not a program at all. He is building a team for a season. And also, like, respectfully, so did Florida State. It took a couple teams to get to the team that they had to go all in on this past year. But I don't think that they're building a program. I think they're going to take a big step back. I think they went all in on everything last year. But yeah, you want to build a program that's sustainable, not build a team for a year. Unless you're just trying to build that team for that year, have whatever success relative to your program, and then bounce, which I don't think Mario is trying to do.
Yeah, if you're building up for 1 year, that's different than we can draw a direct line between most NFL players versus the most successful NFL or college football teams. And then not only are those college football teams producing the most NFL players, they are producing the most early entries into the NFL because they're producing the best talent. It just goes hand in hand. And yes, if they all stayed, those teams would be super teams, but they're recruiting over and over and stacking classes to supplement that. And it is crazy that Greg Russo produced for those 13 games and made that one season stand up. 19 and a half tackles for loss, 15 and a half sacks, one season, 13 games. Bam.
But showed enough. And, his physicality is unique at that size. So, and athleticism. But yeah, there is that. But let's see, are there any potential Alabama head coaching targets that would help Miami, and what would make it tough for Miami in recruiting? Lanning, Kiffin, Norvell, etc., says Paulo. Honestly, I don't see that there's anybody who would make it harder than having Saban there. And like Kiffin's never getting that job. Like Saban had to send him away before. Kiffin's never getting that job. Just like he's never getting the Miami job. But hey, whatever. Really, you're looking at the top of the sport, right? So Kirby Smart, Dan Lanning, Dabo Swinney. Those guys, I think, could make it as hard in terms of recruiting as Saban, or maybe 98% as much. In difficulty. But I mean, just flipping it around, I think it's going to be tough for them, because following a legend in any industry it's tougher than you think. Like, there's the ineffable, interpersonal issues, right, that go with that. And so inside baseball, I look around for different jobs. And even when I was at Miramar High School as an award-winning choir director with a incredibly well-built program that, had never seen the heights that I directed them to, I applied for a job to follow somebody. There were actually two. There was one in Las Vegas at Centennial High School. Alan Zabriskie was the director there. He ended up getting he got his bachelor's from Florida State, got his master's from Florida State, and doctorate of musical arts somewhere else. So that was one. And then there was one in Dallas. It was Dallas Central High School. I forget the guy's name, who had been there since it had opened. And I interviewed for both of those jobs. And, I was like, well, I'm a little bit younger and different. And I was, my view on running a program is maybe not exactly in step with Mr. Williams or Mr. Zabriskie and, the style of music, but at the heart of things, And they're like, yeah, but we really like it the way that Mr. Williams and Mr. Zabriskie did it. And I was just like, you know what? I want to be the guy after the guy, because if you step in, you have to walk in those shoes. That is a huge job. And remember what I said at the beginning about Nick Saban, when I said his next 2-loss season would be the one that ran him out of town, right? The expectations of that job are beyond compare. Pressure breaks pipes, and you ain't seen pressure like the University of Alabama head coaching position. That is going to like the nature of that job is going to run off candidates, right? Everybody is not, look, I'm that dude and I'm going to be this bravado chest out. Da, da, da. You might think that, but when it comes down to brass tacks, bro, that can be a lot. And it will be very interesting for me to see who they get and where they get him from to try to follow Saban. And I tweeted it out. What is acceptable performance, right? Is 10-2 for, let's say you get insert coach here. Who cares, right? Or Dabo, because Dabo's from Alabama. He played there, right? Let's say Dabo. Multiple-time national champion, built up Clemson back into a college football power that they had not been before I was walking this earth. Okay. Dabo goes 10-2, 10-2, 10-2. Is that good enough for them?
No.
Especially if you lose, and he goes 10-2, but goes 2-1 against Auburn. So but lost to them in 3 years, right? Lost to Texas once and lost to LSU once in those 3 years, with 3 other losses to whomever you want to call, right? Is that, and continues to recruit at a top, we'll call it top 8, top 6 level every single year, right? With the NIL, which is very active, with the brand of Alabama that has been as successful, but 10-2, 10-2, 10-2 with either 1 or 2, but fewer than 3 appearances in the SEC championship game. Is that good enough? And Mark said no. And for Alabama people, I believe that the answer is no. So then, like, what are we doing? So then you're going to, in this hypothetical, after 30-6 regular seasons, right, 30 wins and 6 losses over 3 years, plus whatever bowl results and and recruiting and, off-field academics, customer, community service, all the positive runnings of the program. But they are 30-6 plus, let's say they win all their bowl games. So 33-6 over 3 years. Well, and maybe a little bit more because they could still make the playoff with that. I said that they made 2 championship games, so maybe they split their championship games, right? And win one and lose one. So we're at 35-7, 36-7, give or take over 3 years. But if at the end you're only making it to the first round of the 12-team playoff or something like that, and you're going to have calls for that person's job, and they might get fired from that job at, like what I've put before you is not outside the realm of possibilities for the kind of performance that can be seen from a top coach at Alabama and them still getting sent away after 3 years or 4 or whatever for winning 10 games a year. Some years 11, other years 12, with maybe a championship and an SEC championship along the way and 2 championship game appearances. I know that I've built this hypothetical off the top of my head, right? But that's the kind of standard that they're trying to uphold there. And if you know that going in, right, if I win 35 games in 5 years, right? 35 games in 3 years. But depending on the 6 or 7 losses, I can get shit canned. That makes it a really tough situation. And I know that younger fans know Saban's legendary 20-year run there and everything. Go back and look at what Alabama had been before. Like between Bear Bryant and Nick Saban, it was, I mean, I know that Gene Stallings and George Teague, beat Miami that one time. Yeah. But I mean, outside of that,
they had won. Yeah.
That was the one. Look at the other guys they had there. Look at the tenures that they had. Look at the success that they didn't have. Like it could go back to being a 9-3. And again, we're talking about taking Miami from a 7-win to a 9-win annual team, and then teams taking steps from 9 to 10, annually. It is tough, rarefied air to make those leaps, and even more rarefied, honestly, to the point that we've never seen before, like with Nick Saban's on-field success, to sustain that. But sliding back to being a 9.5 win average team after averaging 11 and a half wins over the course of forever, That's a lot. And I know it sounds like only a couple of games, but like a couple of games look at Miami season. A couple of games make that difference, right? That's a lot, man. But we'll see. Definitely. But Alabama is going to be very attractive. They are like Oklahoma, where they want to be good. And so they're going to put everything they can towards being good. But circling back to your directly asked question, I don't think that anybody makes it harder for Miami in terms of performance or recruiting, just because we've seen a legendary run from a legendary coach. I think that any and all options would be a degree down, at least for a while. The only one that I could see being again at Saban's peak, like recruiting power, would be Kirby, who is currently doing that at Georgia. But even if he were to leave Georgia and go over to Alabama, it would take a couple of years to get things going to that level, just like it took him a couple of years after taking over from Mark Richt. Now, he didn't make steps up along that path immediately, but it took a couple of years to get to this monster recruiting machine that they have. Even going to Alabama, just with it being a different person, I think it would still take maybe 2 years to get back to super 100% optimization from Kirby. But that's the only one that I could see being like directly on par with what we've seen from Saban.
So I'm going to add an addendum to your evaluation of Alabama's future coach, and I'm also going to bring up my favorite team. So the addendum would be that I think the focus of just about everyone is going to transition from regular season conference championship to, well, this 12-team playoff. So if you're spitting out 10-2 seasons, but you're able to kick it into gear during the playoff and go deep into the playoff, win a national championship once every 4 or 5 years, and there's going to be a shift in focus versus being the Buffalo Bills or the Atlanta Braves of the modern era of college football and just cranking out conference titles and then stalling in the playoffs in the first or second round, and that being a criticism that, well, you have this great regular season team, but you're not getting the job done in the NCAA tournament. I think there's going to be a shift in evaluation of what success looks like. That's one part.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, I just think that that's going to somewhat shift people's evaluations of coaches and their records versus throughout the history of college football. Your record has been everything. What's your record? You're 11-1. Great. But with this playoff era, that is already somewhat shifted. And now I think it's really going to go into overdrive because there are going to be multiple lost teams in the playoff. And I'll just say this about, I think that there are very few places that have this kind of ridiculous standard. And I don't even know if the list is more than 2. The last time Ohio State didn't win 11 games was 2008. The last time they did not win 11 games was 2008. Urban Meyer lost 9 games in 7 years, and that's including the postseason. And then Ryan Day, you're looking at regular season records of, I'll throw COVID out, but he went 7-0 and went to the national championship game. 12-0, 11-1, 10-2, 11-1, 11-1. That's his run. So he's had one 10-2 season that followed with a Rose Bowl win. So 11-2. That's his worst season. And then this last year he went 11-1. So that's his basement, and he's feeling the heat.
Yeah, but why?
Michigan. Yeah, if Michigan hadn't elevated, yes. But if Michigan was 8-4, 8-4, 8-4, then that would be okay to a certain extent.
If you've gotten to the point where you have a 1-game season, you can, look, we're missing guys. Travion Henderson's out, whatever. It'll be a tougher game against Rutgers for a half. Like Penn State is always, they're the one who just the redheaded stepchild. Like they cannot be, y'all or Michigan. Like I get it, and it's tough because they beat everybody else. But now Harbaugh has gotten Michigan back to this level, right? Where it's like basically both teams are playing a 1-game season. You're going to beat everybody else. It's going to come to, Thanksgiving weekend, either in Ann Arbor or in Columbus. And it's the game. That's why they call it that. But that game determines your season, right? And multiple of those in a row, like losing those, like that's eventually, I mean, it took 12 years, 13 years, but that's what got John Cooper off that job. That's what got I mean, like even Lloyd Carr at the end off of that job, Brady Hoke, what's his name? Rich Rodriguez. Like all the guys who didn't succeed. Now I know that there were other levels of failure for those guys,
Yes.
right? But even if they had been 7-5, but you go, instead of it being 18 out of 19 or whatever it was, right? Instead of it being that, even with guys for years going 7-5, 8-4, maybe even 6-6, but if you go 2-3 against Ohio State in a 5-year span as a Michigan head coach, you can survive that even with middling performance. But if you don't, then like you're not even beating them. So like there's no path towards, success. And so in the inverse for Ryan Day, it's like coming to the point of like, that is the mountain that you have to get over. Like you have to scale Everest and, get to the top.
So everything you just said is completely true. The thing that I will add to that is that, and this is to Michigan's credit, they haven't taken advantage of a slumping Ohio State. Again, 11-1, 11-1,
Right.
11-1, 11-1. They have pushed past it and won that game where you've got to go back right before I started watching college football in the mid 70s, when those teams were meeting 10-0, 10-0, 10-0 every year during the 70s, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
That since then it's been somebody's regressed. And so then the other one just naturally, but for Michigan to push past like a top 3 program in the country when they didn't slump, that's what's astonishing. And that's what Ryan Day's facing. And that's the only reason I say, and I listen to his news conferences most of the time, and about every other week, he will slip. This just kind of comes out of his mouth. He will say, I understand I can't lose a game here. He will make that statement about every other week.
I mean, he says that and, whatever. And, he made that big proclamation midway through the season about like, because somebody, the retrospective from The Athletic came out about the 2022 game when Michigan had all those long Donovan Edwards touchdowns in the second half, about being bigger and tougher or whatever. And so he's, like who's big and who's tough now. And I'm like, bro, you can be big and tough against Iowa. You can be big and tough against Indiana. You can be big and tough against Penn State. And it was after the Penn State game. That's what it was. Like you can be big and tough against whoever. But are you talking that talk after Maize and Blue? That's all and I get it, but that's also emblematic of what we're talking about with Alabama, right? Where it's starting to fray at the seams a little bit and it seeps in other times. Because if you're because that means, and again, I've talked about this with prior Miami coaches. There have been other guys who've been on this channel. There have been other bloggers, other writers who talk about like coaches. They know what people are saying about their teams. I know that they say, we don't pay attention to any of the, you're liars. Everybody in your there are people in every football facility who consume everything that we put out. Probably even this show, right? Well, I know because I've heard from Miami staffers and things, right? So when you start to hear things that were the headline, or not even the headline, but interior to articles and pieces that were written, or like video essays or whatever, when you start to hear that stuff from the coach, even if it's only one little thing here and there, that's the crack in the wall, right? So he's talking about, so we're big and we're tough, and anybody questioning that, nobody said anything about that this week. Nobody said anything about that from Penn State. Nobody said that from Iowa. Nobody said anything about that. But when was that written? 3 weeks ago, and a retrospective of last year's Michigan game. So if you're now bucking up against that, that means that whisper that's in the back of your head, fam, right? So even for a coach who, again, what was it? 12, 11, 10, 11, 11 wins in the last 5 years for Ryan Day. You can hear that. You can see that seeping in. Imagine the pressure and everything. Not only because, again, in the terms of, and I'm going to make this comparison, and you guys are going to see why this conversation happened, right? So with with Michigan and Ohio State, it is a one game. Well, it's really one in a possible. You got to get past Penn State in the middle of the year in October or early November because they're the other best well, in the past. Now you're going to have these other teams, but you know what I mean? And the way that it had been, you got to get past Penn State and then, play who's ever in front of you this week, but you're looking to the last game of the season, Michigan, Ohio State, boom, the game. That's the one that determines your season, right? And with one game to determine your season from both sides, because Harbaugh's talked about it before, other coaches at Michigan, so it's not exclusive to Ryan Day, where you've seen, okay, it's weighing on them. They start mentioning things, pushing back against the commentary from the Ohio State side, from the Michigan side, all these things. You see it start, the walls start to close in with one game being the thing that determines their level of success. Now imagine that you're succeeding Nick Saban at Alabama, and you got Texas, A&M, who is a big spending school, so they matter. So Texas, A&M, LSU, Auburn, Tennessee, Georgia. You're going to play 4 of those 6 probably every single year.
Oklahoma.
And I didn't even mention Oklahoma, right? So if it's 7, I would say 4 of those 7 teams you're going to play every year. So whereas Michigan and Ohio State, I mean, I know that they're going to play these other teams in the new Big Ten, but in the previous, they've had to focus on one game all year and answer for that, and that squeezing the tension of coaches, again, like Mark said, who have won 54 games in the last 5 years, right? And they're starting to answer towards that one game in the middle of a successful 11-1 or 11-0 season prior to this iteration of that game. Imagine Alabama loses the South Soldiers rivalry against Tennessee in September. Imagine they lose 1 Iron Bowl out of 3 or 2 out of 5. Imagine it, like all of these 7 teams, bro. Like that's how much exponentially higher the pressure is, because Alabama fans look at every single game the way that Michigan and Ohio State fans look at the game at the end of the year. And trust and believe whoever that coach is who comes in after Saban is going to feel that, because I don't see this run I don't see a run of whoever takes over being analogous to Saban. And again, going into 2 weeks ago when I talked to my homeboy, to wrap it up, I said the next 2-loss season would be Saban's last. And he didn't even make it past this 2-loss season to make what I predicted to be possible, because 2 losses in Alabama, regardless of when they come, that's a bridge too far. And 3 years in a row without a national championship. That's as long as it's been. It has not been since Miami in 2001. Michigan was in 97 when I was a sophomore in high school until now. It's not been that. It's not been Clemson in 1981 or Georgia in 1980 until it hasn't been a generation or anything. It's been the span of a upcoming high school senior, a current high school junior, rising senior 2025 recruit. That's the span that it's been since Alabama has won a national championship, and it was enough to get Nick Saban up off of that job. Are you listening?
Absolutely. And he created that standard to a large extent. It existed under Bear Bryant, but as you noted, that was not the same program from 1982 until 2007. So for 25 years, it was in that 8-4, 9-3 range almost all the time. And worse than that at times, just prior to him arriving. All right, folks, appreciate you all being here. And one more other note, Miami fans, and this didn't get past most of you, but consider the 4 teams and why we have talked so much about Miami getting out of the ACC. The 4 teams that reach the playoffs currently reside in the SEC and the Big Ten, or will be residing in the Big Ten or the SEC next season. And in addition to that, if you look at all the teams that just missed the playoffs, Oregon, Georgia, Ohio State, Missouri, Ole Miss. If you look at the entire early top 10 released by ESPN, Notre Dame's in there. The rest of the top 10 is the SEC and the Big Ten. So we shall see. Cam, you delivered again tonight. We always appreciate it, sir. Good to see you. And enjoy the rest of your week.
Yeah, man, good to see you. Good to be seen. Always remember, you can come fan with us over at State of the U. We still have pieces going up. I still need to write that Isaiah Thomas piece, and I really need to do it. Especially, maybe I'll do it tonight because he's early enrolling on Friday. So I will get that up there sometime soon. But stateoftheu.com, please come on over and fan with us. And I personally we'll see you in 2 weeks. I have a prior standing commitment next weekend. Next week, Wednesday. But I'm sure Mark will be here with somebody else keeping the seat warm, or exceeding my performance, which always happens when somebody else pinch hits for me. But I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Be sure that you check out the show next week. I will do my best to step away from my event to check out a little bit of it as well. But always appreciate the time. Always appreciate you guys, and always go Canes.
Thanks, Cam. Thanks, everyone.